That was great. Do we want to see that one more time before we get rolling?
Oh, I'm unmuted now. How about one more roll and then we'll rock and roll.
Sounds great. All right, so I'm going to get us started here. I want to welcome everybody to Broadcast Senior Night Zoom edition. I'm Jess Wilson, and I'm coming at you from the Media Factory here in the south end of Burlington. And I'm joined by a couple of folks who should be pretty familiar to all of you, Dr. Vandora Williams and Professor Keith Oppenheim. Thank you both for being here. Over the past 6 years, it's been my pleasure to work with Keith and Champlain seniors on their capstone documentary projects. For those of you who don't know, the Media Factory is a community media center here in Burlington, and we provide educational and public access television channels. We provide free equipment rentals, training in video and audio production, and we're also home to WBTV-LP, a low power FM community radio station. And hosting Champlain students in our media education classroom is certainly a highlight of our spring, each spring here at the Media Factory. But unfortunately, this year, due to the COVID-19 crisis, this particular group of seniors only got to make a couple of visits with us. And Keith will share more about how COVID impacted this semester in this class. But I just want to share that I'm really impressed, so impressed with the resiliency and the ingenuity that all of you showed in the face of this. Despite some really trying circumstances, I think you all managed to create really strong work. And the Media Factory and RETN is pleased to feature your work on our cable channels, our website, and to share it with the greater community. I wanted to share just a couple of technical notes before we get rolling. I'm going to share today's program, and I should say today's program is Champlain Presents, and it is basically a studio program that we normally make at the end of each semester, featuring all of the documentary work of the seniors. And we come here to the Media Factory and do a TV show in the studio. We basically recreated a television show, but on Zoom. So we're going to share that with you today. But as I'm sure many of you have come to find out in the new reality, that sharing video programs via screen share is not necessarily the optimal viewing experience, and that really depends on your internet connection. So I'm going to drop a Vimeo link into the chat. So if you prefer to watch the program there, or you want to watch it later, you can hit that link and watch it there. And that's also something you can share with friends and family and other folks in the Champlain community. And speaking of that chat, I want to encourage you to join in. Make sure you share your comments with all panelists and all attendees. And please keep it positive and cheer on the work of your fellow classmates. And with that, I'm going to turn the show over to Dr. Williams now.
Let me unmute my mic so I can say that again. Thank you, Jess, so much for hosting us for our senior broadcast showcase in 2020. First, I'd like to say congratulations to all of the seniors. It was indeed a wonderful pleasure teaching each and every one of you. I've had an opportunity to get to know everyone over the past 4 years, and you are my first graduating class because we started together at Champlain in 2016. So I just wanted to express just how excited and sad I am to see you're just blossoming and getting ready to go out into this wonderful world that we currently have. Sorry, COVID. But I still believe you guys are going to, everyone will be knocking it out of the ballpark because you are an extremely talented group of students. And to that point, I just wanted to mention that your legacy will continue here at Champlain. Our previous graduating class, we just got word earlier this week that they have earned, last week, excuse me, that they have earned honors at the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Student Production Awards, where we actually call them the Student Emmys. And yet again, we have, you guys just blew it out of the ballpark with the content that you're creating, the stories that you're telling that are so compelling and new. So I want to offer my congratulations. You're in great company with the quality and caliber of work that's coming out of the broadcast media production program. And just to name those, In Plain Sight earned an award for the short form nonfiction. Let me conform my notes. And then for House Concerts, they also earned a first place for nonfiction long form in that category as well. And we also had an honorable mention for Growing a Vision. So that type of senior capstone work that's been coming out of just last year's class, I think this year's class will be no different. So I just wanted to offer my congratulations, and I cannot wait to see what you have done this time. And now I will pass it on to my partner in crime, Keith.
Yes, thank you, my co-criminal. Thanks to Vandora and to Jess for those lovely introductions. Here we are, everybody. Normally, what happens is we hold this event. We have this showcase where we honor the seniors and we show the program in Alumni Auditorium at Champlain College. And it's pretty much students, faculty, the Champlain community watching this show and the student projects. And one of the ironic twists about COVID-19, evidenced in our showcase today, is that we're farther apart, but through virtual technology, we can actually gather more easily. And we have probably a much bigger crowd today. And because of that, I want to explain a couple of things about what this whole thing is. So across the college, our students do what are called capstone projects. And those are designed to be culminating experiences in different majors during senior year, where students essentially put it all together. And in the broadcast program, that means making a 10-minute-ish documentary in teams of about 2 or 3. And as Jess was explaining, we work directly with the Media Factory. She does a lot of co-teaching with me. And the Media Factory is our community media center. And we create a program which houses all those documentaries in one show. Well, as we've been referencing, everything was going normally until about mid-March. The campus closed, and suddenly our students didn't have access to equipment. They really didn't have access to each other, and they had to work remotely. They often had to do some of their final interviews via Zoom, and we had to do studio production through Zoom. You're going to see that in a second. It's kind of cool. It would be a poor introduction if I didn't mention this. I am so proud of my students. The work that you're about to see certainly got plenty of input and guidance specifically from Jess and me, and on one project, Vandora too, because she was specifically involved in creating Forget Me Not Vermont. But it's really important to say, with all that the topics and the stories are theirs. We're about to start, and once I stop talking, there might be a little bit of a pause before you're actually going to see the show. And remember, we're playing video through Zoom, so just to reiterate what Jess said, you have the option of watching the show through the link. And please use the chat constructively and cheer on the students and the great work that they've done. So now we present Champlain Presents.
Welcome to Champlain Presents. I'm Julia Leonard.
And I'm Charlie Dalgleish. This is the 6th time the broadcast program has produced a showcase of documentaries produced by seniors at Champlain College.
This time around, 13 of us made 5 documentaries, each about 10 minutes long. We should point out, when the semester began, everything was moving along fairly normally. Then, the pandemic struck. Like nearly everyone else on the planet, we had to figure out how to conduct our lives in a whole new way.
For our class, that meant we had to communicate and work remotely. For several of these projects, the story changed, and the coronavirus outbreak became part of the narrative. And as you can see, the pandemic has altered the presentation of this program.
So we're doing our show with all of us in different places, often different states. But through technology, we can still gather, introduce our stories, and even interview each other. So, say hi, everyone. Now that you've met everyone, let's give a preview of what you're going to see.
A story that will make you hungry. Our classmates take us to Vermont diners and show how these restaurants do more than feed us. They provide a sense of community. Coronavirus, of course, had an impact.
We go underground to the DIY music scene. 2 in our group, both musicians themselves, profile Burlington rock bands and show how the virus disrupted, but did not stop, do-it-yourself concerts.
Music from another era. We tell the story of an extraordinary sheet music collection at Champlain College and look at what it says about Vermont history. We get help from Champlain's a cappella group, Purposeful Dissonance.
New Zealand and Vermont. 2 of us spent a semester abroad learning about the Maori, the native people of New Zealand. We tell the story of Maori leaders and artists who came to Champlain with their culture and a gift.
But our first story is about something that sadly is all too common. Research indicates that up to 1 in 4 women in college experience sexual assault.
However, the Me Too movement, along with recent news events, have given some hope that there'll be more reporting of assault cases and more women who find justice. Lindsay Mulligan, Annabelle Pike, and Olivia Cephalou interviewed their own friends who are survivors and asked a key question: has anything really changed? Their story is called, Who Is She?
Have you ever thought about how pervasive sexual assault is in our society? I'm Olivia.
I'm Annabelle.
I'm Lindsay. We're 3 college students who have been thinking about how this is part of our lives. We all know someone who's experienced sexual assault, and we want to ask, in the Me Too era, what's it like for victims? Has anything changed? On the surface, the answer seems to be yes.
In 2006, Tarana Burke founded the Me Too movement to raise awareness of the issue that is abuse and assault in our society. Fast forward 11 years to 2017, the Me Too movement exploded largely because of exploits of power in the entertainment industry, more specifically with this guy, Harvey Weinstein, the mogul Hollywood producer.
Actress Alyssa Milano had enough of Weinstein's exploits and tweeted, "If you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write Me Too as a reply to this tweet." Millions did.
Suddenly, Me Too was a part of the language, and there was a sense things were shifting. The media displayed stories of survivors and those who got exposed.
Roger Ailes is out. Fox News anchor Bill O'Reilly will not be returning to the O'Reilly Factor.
Dozens of women accused Cosby of sexual assault.
For many women, for our friends, one thing seemed constant. The price of speaking up is still high. And when women do speak, they feel suspect when others wonder, who is she?
I am Molly Aldrich, and I am a survivor of sexual assault. Sophomore year of college, I went on a spring break trip with my two best friends at the time. And we went to Bermuda, and we did an all-inclusive package at like this resort and went all out and just like that like dream college vacation that you're like traveling with your friends. And I don't drink, but like both of my friends were getting like drunk off their asses every day. And we were just like going to the beach and going to the pool all day long. And then our last night there, one of our friends, so I went with one of my friends, Christine, and then our other friend, and they had bought, when we went into town one day, a bottle of Jim Beam whiskey. And so he drank like that entire bottle, which is an absurd amount of alcohol. We hung out for a while longer, and then eventually decided to head in for the night. And then probably like 15 minutes later, he came like screaming into the room, like pounding on the door, lost his room key, completely nude, and just like obliterated drunk.
Hello, my name is Carmen. It was Tuesday night, and I got together with some of my friends, and the person that I ended up at their house was someone that I went to Champlain with and who was like my freshman year housemate. I got really unexpectedly drunk. Just gonna call and see what my friend is up to, and I was like, hey, how are you? Like, are you up? Like, do you want to hang out for a little bit? And he was like, yeah, come over. Like, you're welcome anytime. I was so drunk, and we had smoked a little bit of weed together. And I like fell asleep on the bed right in front of the window as soon as we came in.
And so he decided like, okay, I'm gonna go take a shower. And so I laid down in bed. I heard him puking in the bathroom. So I went in there. He said he was gonna go to sleep in the bathroom in case he needed to wake up and puke again. Then went to check on him. He was asleep. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna knock out now. When I woke up, he was raping me in my sleep.
I woke up and they were like my pants were pulled down. They were grabbing me and kissing my neck, and I was like limp, and I was like in and out of consciousness, and I remember being so shocked.
In these assault situations, it's frequent for survivors to know their assaulters. These perpetrators can be friends, family, or even employers. One thing that is common with these assaulters is their power and using it to their advantage. That can make it easy for the justice system to dismiss survivors in court.
Media can skew truth, right? And if you have, as we were seeing, if you have power in the United States, as it is might be true in other countries, but let's stick to the U.S. If you have power and you have money, then you're able to skirt certain responsibilities, including the one around violence.
And people, especially women, shouldn't be like held accountable, like, hey, that guy thinks you're pretty, don't lead him on by making eye contact or being nice to him or being a friend, you know? And I say that because this whole thing with the perpetrator, they were telling me afterwards, like, I just loved you so much. Like, I couldn't help it. Like, I always thought you were so beautiful. I loved you so much. Like, that's why I did it. I just couldn't control myself. And I'm like, am I supposed to be flattered?
He was like apologetic. I mean, he texted me immediately after, something along the lines of like, we should talk about what happened last night. Like, I'm so sorry, and essentially apologized.
February 2020, Harvey Weinstein was convicted on 2 counts of sexual assault. He was later sentenced to 23 years in prison, an outcome tougher than many expected. For some, it was a pivotal moment in the history of sexual assault cases, but many survivors say no amount of jail time will repair the lives he ruined and the careers he destroyed. Others, like Carmen, were simply left with feelings of uncertainty.
Like, I wasn't expecting that to happen, and I was glad that it did, but at the same time, it's like the least that can be done. There's been no attempt to, that I know of reparations for the women and his victims. And he was only held accountable for 2 of the incidents. I believe that there should be a lot more done than just putting someone in jail about it. I think there's transformative justice measures that should be considered and practiced, as well as like preventative ones, of course. It shouldn't have been such a fight. And what about everyone else? What about all the other offenders that are still walking around and not held accountable?
Molly's case went to court, but because the jurisdiction was in Bermuda, out of the United States, the case fell apart. It all unfolded as the Me Too movement was becoming a social media phenomenon.
Blew up so quickly, and there was like all of a sudden hundreds of Facebook posts, and I was like, well, I'm not, like, when you're in the middle of like an investigation, you're like, I'm not going to share my story on Facebook. Like, that feels like BS right now, and I don't want to get in trouble for sharing things I'm not supposed to.
For some, Me Too represented something major, a chance to speak up.
But the Weinstein case gave Molly hope. Hope for survivors and hope for the justice system.
I think the Me Too movement impacted the Weinstein case by getting more voices that had been hurt by him in the actual courtroom. But I think the reverse is actually what's more important, is how the Weinstein case impacted the Me Too movement, in that it really showed that by speaking up, there is actual change.
Despite what some see as progress, there's an uneasiness. Many still feel the judicial system is unfair and does almost everything to rid survivors of their credibility. The question is, what has Me Too changed?
I do think that there's sexism, not in the Me Too movement necessarily, but how the culture responds to the Me Too movement. The narrative about the perpetrator is not getting a fair chance in telling usually his story. This happened so long ago, how do we know that she's just not out to get money or screw him? Sort of the doubt, the response of doubt indicates to me that we don't trust women's stories. I think that the response, if it's backlash, question, anything other than I believe her, tells me something about our culture and how we treat women.
Harvey Weinstein was taken down through a huge amount of effort and force. Doesn't feel like that much, but at least the government and the judicial system is finally taking it somewhat seriously. I think there's a lot more, though, that could be done.
The Me Too movement and the Harvey Weinstein case have had an impact, but it's hard to know what's changed. Survivors of sexual assault will always carry their stories as they try to get back to the people they were. They try to reconfigure who they are while catching glimpses of others who are now in the place they once were. And they continue to wonder, who is she, and will she ever get justice?
We're back with the producers of Who Is She? Lindsay, what was your biggest obstacle your group faced making the video?
You know, Julia, we picked such a dense topic with sexual assault, and so we had to ask our survivors some very, struggling questions, and we wanted to make sure that they were comfortable answering those questions. So I would say our biggest obstacle was making sure that we were telling the right story with the information that we have, and making sure that our survivors had their stories told as clearly as possible.
Thank you. Annabelle, you followed Weinstein's case to address his outcome in your video. What was your reaction to his sentence?
I was really surprised. I did not expect him to get sentenced with as many years as he got. I think it's really great that he actually did get a bigger sentencing than I was anticipating, but I do think that there could be more done, especially because only 2 of the women that accused him got their justice and the others didn't.
Olivia, what is something you want your viewers to take away from this video?
I think the biggest takeaway for this documentary is that it's a really powerful piece, and it largely showcases the 2 voices of Molly and Carmen, so 2 people who have experience and have since recovered from sexual assault. And we never get to see that, or at least not often. So just taking a step back and realizing that privilege and hearing what they have to say.
Great work. Thank you all.
Diners are an American classic. They're restaurants, born in the 20th century, where comfort food and atmosphere give customers a sense of home. Connor Decker, Noah Matson, and Jeremy Gabor set out to capture the cultures of diners in Vermont and to explain why they're so important to so many. Their story is called Order Up.
There's a big difference between having lunch at a diner versus having lunch in your office with your takeout, or going somewhere really fancy. I think that eating is all about experience, and I think choosing to eat in particular ways or particular places is choosing to have a particular experience.
The experience of the American diner is unique. Diners are places where people come for eggs, pancakes, big sandwiches, fries, lots and lots of coffee, and seemingly endless conversation.
I haven't had a bad soup in here.
In Vermont, diners fit the landscape. They're a sort of refuge in a city or town, a home away from home. This is the story of how that home has, for a long time, been a staple of life, and how the livelihood of diners suddenly came to a halt. In the heart of Burlington, Vermont, is Handy's Lunch. The diner has been in the same location since 1945, and over time has become a hotspot for an everyday eatery. What makes Handy's Lunch special is the Handys themselves. The owner, Earl Handy, is the 3rd generation of his family to own the diner, and his presence has become ingrained in the diner's image since he took over in 1994.
This diner means everything to me. I mean, this is who I am. I mean, I am the diner is me. It's become who I am.
Super welcoming to everybody who comes in. They remember people's names, they remember people's orders. My buddies and I have been coming here for probably 10 years because when we walk in, we know that we're going to be greeted by a friendly face, awesome food, and great people.
I've known Earl since we were in high school, actually even before then. Coming to Handy's Lunch for a long time, even when it was his mom and his dad.
Yeah, it is sort of like stepping back into time a little bit to enter a place where you're expecting Coca-Cola and burgers and fries and some homemade pie.
It seems like the atmosphere is from like 50 years ago. Like there's not many places like this around.
The Bird's Eye Diner in Castleton, Vermont has become a favorite amongst Castleton College students and locals alike. Owner John Raylan takes pride in preserving the historic aspect of this diner and its role in the history of the town.
There has been a diner on that location since the 40s, maybe even earlier than that. And in 1968, there was a fire and that burned the wooden building diner that was over there. And in 1968, this current dining car, which was manufactured in Paterson, New Jersey, it's a Silk City Diner, was brought here.
Hard time getting out of bed.
Third week around.
Without having good food, we would not be successful. I think we have actually very good food, and I think we offer good value for the money that you pay.
It's comfort food, and I think that's the other thing about what makes diner food so special is it makes you feel good, you know? It's probably not the healthiest, but it makes you feel good after you're done eating it.
It's like a little guilty pleasure. We're going to go back in time. We're not going to worry about where our food was sourced from, and we're particularly not going to worry about the cholesterol and calories. We're going to just appreciate the guilty pleasure of indulging in just homey, warm comfort food.
My favorite dish is the Big Daddy. It's a big breakfast dish, 2 pancakes, eggs, sausage, toast, hash browns, the whole works.
I always have the same thing. Every morning I have 2 eggs over medium and 2 slices of whole wheat toast, dry, no butter, and coffee.
Everybody gets hungry, so you have to feed them. And you want to make it as best as you possibly can. You know, you don't want to serve bad food. You don't want to serve the best that you possibly can make. And we never serve what we wouldn't eat ourselves.
I mean, you can make eggs at home, but eggs at home don't taste like diner eggs. You know, bacon at home doesn't taste like diner bacon. And, you know, even a burger, even a hot dog, like, those are things that, like, just are special. And those are things that, like, have become almost like a special treat, because everybody's always trying to be so healthy and always like, I'll have something with kale or, you know, salad for lunch or a turkey sandwich for lunch. But there's something about like coming in and getting a couple Texas dogs, you know. There's nothing like a chili dog for lunch.
If you want to be left alone and kind of read your book in the corner, I'm not sure diner's the place to go. Like, you can kind of expect to be talked to. People are going to come up and interact with you.
To have a horseshoe counter, to be able to talk baseball, politics, whatever you want to talk about, and have an open conversation.
You actually become, in a way, a prominent member of the place where you work when you are creating community through your workplace, through your diner.
Different people that are sitting around the bar are you know, different faces that you've seen around the community. They're different business owners, different families that have been here their whole lives, generations. Earl knows them all.
Met a gentleman who was in his 90s, and he had worked here when he was 13 years old. Yeah, washing dishes. And they come back all the time. Yeah.
It's kind of sad now that I've seen so many people come and go. There are some regulars that have been in here and sat in these seats that have passed on now. And Earl's mom's, you know, she's still around, but she's not here anymore. And just sit here and read the paper and work at the same time. And yeah.
Thank you. Diners represent happy and simple times, but sometimes the world is more complicated.
The Vermont Health Department announced the state's first suspected case of coronavirus.
That's what I need Vermonters to know, and this is what I need from them. I need you to stay home.
We were going to visit a few more diners from across Vermont, but that all changed when COVID-19 struck. The United States is responding to the COVID-19 virus. Schools have gone online, many businesses have shut down, and restaurants that choose to stay open are only doing takeout. The diner, as a place of refuge, a home away from home, is suddenly in limbo. But if we have learned anything about these places, it's this: the community created by a diner is unbreakable. And now, this sudden slow season is both unprecedented and unpredictable. But there is hope that at some point soon, coffee will be brewing, eggs frying, and customers will once again rally in support of their local diner.
I try to think that my food is some of the best, but I think the camaraderie, the family atmosphere, and 90% of my customers have become close friends. So I think it's more just to come in and say, see me, not just to see me. I mean, you know what I mean.
One time my buddies and I came in, and the old UVM basketball coach, Tom Brennan, was here. And I was a not very good Vermont basketball player back when I was in high school, and I went with my basketball buddies. And Coach Brennan knew who we were because Earl had told us. And we probably spent the whole breakfast just talking to him, and I think he was with his son. And to just sit in this casual place and just shooting the breeze with a Vermont legend was really something special.
Another favorite memory of mine is I met my husband in here, and we've been married now for, 11 years.
There was a guy, he came in and he literally had a box of Dunkin' Donuts with him. All of a sudden he just opened up the box and was eating Dunkin' Donuts as an appetizer. And I was just what are you doing? And he was just having a snack. I'm no. You can't bring donuts into my restaurant and then eat them. And he's I don't like your attitude. Well, I want to talk to a manager. So I went out back, I grabbed a green apron and put on a baseball hat. And I came out and I was just you'd like my place and you'd like to see me? And he was yeah. And then he was wait, what? Totally he's wasn't I? And I'm no, twin. And the guy had no idea. And I, to this day, still get one of the biggest laughs out of it.
We're back with the producers of Order Up. Connor, what was the draw of diners?
So when we first started talking about doing a documentary together, we found we had a really common interest in food, and we wanted to explore some element of food which was often overlooked, and that took the shape of the American Diner.
Very nice. Noah, what makes a diner different from an ordinary restaurant for you?
For me, diners are a classic piece of Americana, and when you bring around community and a whole city or town behind one diner, it's a great experience to get a bite to eat.
Cool. Jeremy, how did you select the diners covered in the documentary, namely Handy's?
Well, actually, Nart, I'm good friends with the owner of Handy's, Earl. I went in there one day a couple of years ago, sat down, got a bite to eat, and I've been friends ever since. I thought it would be a perfect sort of gateway diner for us to get started in our documentary.
Cool. Thank you for your time, boys. Great work.
In Burlington, there's a music scene that looks something like this, or at least it used to. People go to someone's basement and pack in to hear a band. It's loud, sweaty, and for a lot of us, a whole lot of fun. But for many bands, it's also a way to get started. Nathaniel Hart and Griffin Paul Moran take us to that underground music world in their story, Do It Yourself.
What is the point of DIY? Well, it kind of goes past any mental and logical barrier, and it's sort of an innate, almost primal thing. It's kind of embedded in us as humans, I think. As far as musicians go, this is not for everybody, but musicians can tell you that it's hard to explain because it defies all logic. There's not a lot of money involved, and there's a lot of work. It's a very labor-intensive thing, but it's a labor of love. And who's ever been able to explain love, right?
In Burlington, music plays below the streets. From under the houses and apartments of this small city, dozens of bands and artists pour their hearts out in crowded, dark basements. Griffin and I play in a band called Moxie Shotgun. We've been in the scene for over a year now, but like a lot of bands, we're just temporary, about to go our separate ways. But before we do, we wanted to tell a story and show a world a lot of people never get to see. Many from outside might not understand the appeal, but to those of us who stand shoulder to shoulder at these shows, the draw is powerful. Juicebox is one of the most interesting bands we've played alongside. The 7 of them come from very different musical backgrounds, with the band consisting of 2 rappers, 2 saxophonists, a keyboardist, a bassist, and a drummer. They have a unique sound mixing rap, jazz, and funk. The band has acquired an impressive fan base for their age and DIY roots.
It's hard to not let the ego get stroked a little bit when the most established venues in town want you to open for shows and stuff like that. But really at the core for me, it's mainly just like the notion of that we get to all have fun and play music together. We make other people feel good too, not just ourselves. Like that's really the most rewarding part.
I met Jacob. I saw him rap and I was like, we should get an instrumental crew backing you.
Juicebox has made a name for themselves in Burlington, and people are starting to notice.
It's like they do like, you know, all kinds of like funk and like rap and like crazy stuff.
Juicebox isn't the only band blowing out basements in Burlington.
My name's Nate Topham. I'm in a heavy rock project called Zodiac Sutra.
The second I saw Nate drumming, I was like, fuck, I wish he was in my band.
Once I like started playing with him, it was like, wow, like there's like something really cool here. We wanted a bassist. We really needed like to get somebody in, and we were lucky enough to get this motherfucker.
It's definitely like music that's by musicians for musicians, and it's just fun. I don't know. And when you can nail it, like it's satisfying.
I think it also helps to have a style of music or maybe a style of songwriting that nobody else is doing in the area as well. Totally. It definitely is important to not be aping or like imitating, keeping it as organic and as unique to our personalities and the way we collectively work together as possible.
It's never really like about the money or like the attention or anything like that. It's really just about being in a scene with a bunch of people who are having a good time with you. I mean, for me, if it's like, you know, music that me and my friends get to make together that people like can get down to, that's all the better. That's just such a cool thing to be a part of.
Despite their comparatively small fan bases, all of these musicians still record and release their music independently.
Coming out of the studio with a song that sounds good and you feel good about, and you're like, man, I want to like text this to my parents. I really like having a solidified product like that, because it's hard to take a live show and like send that out to the world, but you can take a recorded single and be like, boom, listen to this.
Might drink a glass, a girl that dress look class, a red M3. She don't have black tie function to go to, chuck it up to it like a key.
If you're really efficient in the studio,
you don't have to spend that much money.
Yeah, and we learned that by being really inefficient in the studio.
I feel like the best like takes in the studio are the most certain takes. Like for me, at the end of a take, I'm either like, yes, that was good, or no, that wasn't good. and if it's in any way like, no, that wasn't good, then I don't want it on the record.
Burlington's basement shows are spaces where creativity can be shared. But suddenly, all of that stopped. The coronavirus outbreak reminded everyone how fragile this small community is.
The head of the World Health Organization now says the global mortality rate of this new coronavirus is 3.4%.
Governor Phil Scott has issued a stay home, stay safe order.
Everything shut down or went online, including stores, restaurants, and even schools. Social distancing became the thing. Making music became much more challenging for bands like Juicebox that take advantage of college recording studios.
We're like trying to make headway recording stuff, but now that UVM's shut down, we can't be in their studio anymore, so we're gonna have to go somewhere else for those.
All of our gigs for the next 2 months basically got canceled. We're not taking gigs, we gotta focus on recording.
State officials ordered limits on gatherings to no more than 10 people. Any events or large assemblies were canceled, and DIY concerts were no exception. Juicebox was on tour as the crisis hit the U.S.
Playing out of state is nice. I wish that we had a better frame of reference that wasn't like, oh, playing out of state, playing out of state, playing out of state, global pandemic.
We had 2 shows canceled.
Great shows. We had 3 because the Orlando's gig.
Yeah, so we had a bunch of
that one
gigs
got
planned.
canceled too.
Overnight, it seemed like the world of DIY was on hold. All Burlington DIY shows were canceled for an undetermined amount of time. Reality was setting in. But even in the face of a global pandemic, the DIY community stayed relevant. Big Heavy World, Burlington's volunteer-staffed music promoter, launched live-stream concerts.
This one's for all you babies in diapers.
So we started out offering our studio as a real low-key resource for artists to stream from if they weren't able to do that independently, so that they could stay in touch with people remotely with their music. You know, DIY to me means you're not waiting around for permission to do what you want. You're not waiting around for someone to tell you the parameters of what your vision should be.
We got 612 views, 621 views last night on our stream.
So first, it'll probably be better than basement shows. That's more
people than have ever come to any basement show I've ever played.
That's in Block Park.
While the live streams have proved to be successful for many local bands, the atmosphere of basement shows is sorely missed.
It's pretty fun. Like, we get to bum around and play shows and like have a good time playing music, theoretically make small quantities of money doing what we like to do. After every show, people come up to us and are like, hey, that sounded really good. And we get to go up to each other at the end of shows and be like, hey, that sounded pretty good.
Like, we're all doing different kinds of genres and different acts and all kinds of stuff, but like, you know, people support each other and people promote each other around here.
Everyone's looking out for each other. No one has bad intentions. You know, it's a great way to get out of your comfort zone, man, but still find a piece of home no matter where you go.
So fast, pop rush bad, everything so fast, pop rush bad, everything so fast, pop rush bad, everything so fast,
My fate to edges, I lost my wallet. The lady sent it back with hugs and kisses. See, that's what I believe in, that's what's holding. Not some book that's homophobic. My love's not anaerobic. I need to breathe it, that shit that leave me open. I like sex, I like weed, I tend to smoke that shit by ounces. But how the fuck can I pronounce it? I just feel me cause I'm daddy, yeah, he might do with the best. Be the lady, see the best, he's hungry, they like you with destiny. Child of the system, from the risk you ain't against me. Child of the system, from you know I'm on that mercy. Nah. Let it say, gummy fed, set it stem, near, learn, subject like white cliff, had it up, rush bed, have it paint so fast, damn it up, rush bed, have it paint so fast, damn it up, rush bed, have it paint so fast, damn it up, rush bed, have it paint so fast, damn it up, rush bed, have it paint so fast, damn it up, rush bed, have it paint so fast, damn it.
We're back with Nathaniel and Griffin. Excellent work, guys. So, Nathaniel, what was it like filming during the crowded basement shows?
You know, we accepted going into every basement that we weren't going to get the highest quality footage or audio. I tried not to get hung up on things like lighting or picture quality. You know, if it's grainy and slightly shaky, that matters less than if you captured an interesting, well-timed moment.
Thank you. Griffin, how did the COVID-19 pandemic impact the production of your documentary?
Well, COVID-19 caused our production to flat out stop at first. We were originally planning on filming way more shows and bands, but that was obviously impossible to accomplish when all the DIY shows got canceled. We also wanted to interview more members of Juicebox, but when UVM and Champlain went remote, most of their members were out of state and had no plans to come back anytime soon. So it definitely threw a wrench into the gears for us, but we ultimately decided to incorporate that into the documentary, and I think it ended up working out.
Thank you, Griffin, and thank you, Nathaniel. Excellent work.
These days, we can download just about any music we want in seconds. So it might seem quaint that music once came to people in a very different way, by the distribution of sheet music. Travis Washington, Charlie Dalgleish, and Luke Redmond tell the story of a prominent collection of sheet music at Champlain's library, one that reveals a lot about life in the Green Mountain State for nearly a century. Their piece is called Forget Me Not Vermont.
If you were to go back to Vermont in the mid-19th century, some of the mountains and landscapes may not look all that different from today, but back then, how Americans heard about or perceived the Green Mountain State sometimes came down to what was sung about it. And that history is here, in this sheet music. While it may not look like much, these pages hold the stories and ideas that informed and shaped the culture for a century. The sheet music collection at Champlain College tells a story, many stories in fact, of love, death, family, and what was expected of people in the world of northern New England. And that included gender roles.
So the special collections at Champlain College help us to understand the past in a way that you can't get from reading a history book or a journal article about the lives of everyday Vermonters using ordinary things like photographs and postcards, theater programs, and sheet music.
In Champlain Valley on a little hillside farm where I spent so many happy childish days. There I learned to love a maiden.
Sheet music was mostly used by middle-class families who could afford a piano. However, The music was used to capture the ears of anyone listening to rally behind a cause.
This is a very communal kind of art form, but it's singing and writing music even, playing music. It was something that pervaded all aspects of society.
Activists and politicians used music to promote their causes. Calvin Coolidge's presidential campaign exploited that practice. Coolidge found songwriters for these tunes in the Green Mountain State. Songs like Keep Cool and Keep Coolidge and Coolidge and Dawes for the Nation's Cause not only kept people's focus on politics, but also fed the perception of the presidential lifestyle. First Lady Grace Coolidge viewed music as a way to define culture in the White House.
She's probably most well known for the musicals, or musicals that they were called, that she put on at the White House when Calvin was vice president. It was in the East Room of the White House and would invite various classical dignitaries to play or sing at those musicals. It garnered a rather large audience.
Other songs in the collection also had the power to spread ideas quickly, to not only change public perception, but also laws. Take Little Brown Jug. A popular song with an upbeat tune, but also a sad story about a man and his bottle. The song follows a man who loves to drink, but as it goes on, it becomes clear it focuses on alcohol addiction and the problems that came with it.
There's the problem of the man who is supposed to be responsible being kind of lured away from being responsible by alcohol.
In the Prohibition era, songs like Little Brown Jug changed minds. A society without alcohol once seemed unthinkable in 19th century America. The Women's Christian Temperance Union used songs like this to change the attitudes of politicians and civic leaders about the use of alcohol.
Our attitudes about alcohol and drugs are all post-prohibition. And prohibition really actually works for the time that it's in place, in the sense of people's habits towards alcohol change.
These pieces of music also conveyed societal norms about beauty, romantic life, and family. Silver Lake March and Two Step pictures a couple seemingly on a date.
The people who are illustrated on the cover of Silver Lake represent this kind of fashionable young couple. And I think that the way that they're dressed, the way they're portrayed, both reflects high fashion for American clothing at the time, and then also might have influenced people who were purchasing the sheet music.
The man is tall, with broad shoulders, dressed in a suit, hat in hand. The woman is thin, young, and wearing a full-length dress. They're standing close together but are not touching. This romantic slow dance song communicates conservative ideas about how to dress for a date. The imagery of this cover provides a glimpse into societal norms. Much like today, female bodies were used to sell the music. Sheet music covers were often just as important as the music itself, since the cover was used to sell the music and followed popular trends to grab people's attention.
I think it's really interesting looking at the lithographs of the sheet music, because nowadays when we buy music, it's digital, it's different. But in those days, people would go down to music rooms, they'd look at the sheet music and they'd be attracted to this lovely cover. That would draw you in. So I think that resulted in a lot of sales. It had a beautiful cover design.
Other songs were even more explicit about the rules of love. Uh-huh, meaning yes, is a song written by a woman about a man courting a young lady, trying to get her consent.
Will you kiss me? And she sighs, ah. When a honey girl like this tries to have you share a kiss, your love is sweet.
Well, in some ways this song is almost like a portrayal of a conversation between a young man and a young woman. And on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward. But if you look deeper, it's actually pretty complicated. It reflects a very traditional take on gender roles in which women weren't supposed to directly express their feelings of love and attraction or directly encourage a suitor. But depending on which way you read the song and the lyrics, you can see that women could kind of indirectly, in a roundabout way, express their feelings and get their feelings across to the person they were interested in.
In one way, Uh-huh comes across as a cute-sounding song, but in another, it's a sort of time capsule and a template showing women how to show emotion. And while that song looks at the female perspective, Bachelor's Dream shows the ideal life of a man in 1873.
We have this portrayal of a young man who's fallen asleep leaning back in his chair. He's dreaming of what should be the ultimate goal for a young bachelor like him, having a young wife and a child. Through this piece, it's tapping into the social expectation for a young man to get married and not only have a family, but have the traditional nuclear family type headed by an opposite sex couple.
In the same way today's popular songs carry messages of what's cool and how to act, Bachelor's Dream made clear to young men the lives they were expected to lead. The song That Young Man Across the Way features a lady who allows a man to stare at her from afar.
So let him stare, I do not care, I shall not go away, young man.
It's only really in the 19th century that you begin to get women representing in artworks their feelings. Before that, poetry, drama and stuff, you'd have women who were speaking, but it was always women being looked at, or a man imagining a woman being looked at. And this is a really bizarre one because you would only find it beginning in the 19th century. I am being looked at.
Written by a woman in 1874, the song has themes of female empowerment and was a precursor to the women's suffrage movement in early 20th century Vermont. It was songs like That Young Man Across the Way, written to empower women of the time, that inspired another generation of activists and songwriters, Lena Cole being one of them, and another artist in the collection. In 1908, Cole composed 3 Cheers for Old Vermont, a nostalgia-filled tune about her home state.
I think we all have that longing for, what may have never happened, but the good old days. And I think especially at the turn of the century, of the last century, there was a great anxiety throughout the country, but also in Vermont. I think a lot of these songs reflected a longing for what at least people thought were the simple old days. And so often these songs were popular, I think, because they stirred up those emotions of a time of a golden age gone by, which, maybe never really existed.
Then, in 1914, Cole published Only a Bunch of Forget-Me-Nots, a sad ballad about a long-lost love. Throughout the song, Cole compares herself and her love to faded forget-me-nots.
Sweetest in my thoughts, my precious faded blue forget-me-nots.
Although it's late, it clearly refers to sort of that Victorian era flower symbolism of the 19th century. And certainly the forget-me-nots, that they called it true blue, and that reflected loyalty, fidelity, I will always remember you. And this song is so sweet because it talks about remembering someone you loved way back when, and all you have left is that bunch of forget-me-nots.
The sheet music of this time was used to define the status quo, sway the public, and even start movements. But people always had a soft spot for some nice Vermont nostalgia. No song better captures that than The Green Hills of Vermont I Love So Well.
Hills of Vermont, where the cool pine forests are, and the arbutus bloom sweetly in the dell.
Nostalgia at this period is also cutting edge. The pace of change was moving fast through the 19th century. At the turn of the 19th century, people are anxious about it. Vermont is a place that in the American imaginary is like America's home in some ways. So many of the Vermont men, they don't come back to live, but they come back to celebrate Old Home Week.
In 2020, popular music is listened to on streaming platforms and smartphones, but the values and issues talked about in the sheet music collection are still prevalent today.
The green hills of Vermont, where the cool pine forests are, arbutus bloom sweetly in the dell. Though I've been many climes since my happy boyhood times, none were like them
We're back with the producers, Travis, Charlie, and Luke, with a couple questions. Travis, how did you come to select this topic?
So we received a grant from the Council of Independent Colleges where we were supposed to do some research in the Champlain Special Collections. And we decided that the sheet music itself was the best representation of Vermont and people of the past. And we felt that music could really help make the collections come alive.
Luke, what problems did you face in making this documentary?
Our biggest problem was actually file sharing during the edit. After the COVID pandemic started and we had to start working remotely, we figured the edit would be one of the easier parts to manage at separate computers. But for some reason, the file sharing wasn't wanting to cooperate due to some sort of compatibility issue, so we had to get really creative while sharing the files for the project with each other.
Charlie, how did you decide what songs to include?
Yeah, so we just wanted to show the widespread impact of sheet music in a couple different ways. So we ended up picking songs that we thought just best represented the entire collection, had the most depth, and just ended up talking about the same themes we wanted to focus on in the documentary.
Great work, guys. Thanks a lot.
The history of many countries often includes the suppression of native cultures. Julia Leonard and Kevin Kukla went to New Zealand on a study abroad program, and part of their education focused on the culture on the native Maori people. Julia and Kevin introduce us to Maori in their native land, but also tell the story of a visit to Champlain College and a very special gift. Their story is called Carving New Paths, a Maori Story.
This is the story of some students who studied abroad and came in contact with a culture expressing itself far beyond its home in the South Pacific. This journey starts a world away and ends up in Vermont with the unveiling of a beautiful present. But the real story is older and greater than any piece of art that can be bestowed.
The name Aotearoa, which is the Maori name for New Zealand, came about when the great ancestors, when they first came to New Zealand. Kupe was the captain of one of the canoes, the first person to arrive to New Zealand. A woman on his boat looked out and saw there was a long cloud formation, and she uttered the words, He Aotearoa, a long white cloud. And so the name of New Zealand became Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud.
The Maori lived undisturbed in New Zealand until the 17th century, when Europeans first made landfall on the island. Suddenly, their lives were very different. The British colonized New Zealand, seizing land from the Maori and killing those who stood up to them. The Maori lived for years under British rule, forced to assimilate at the risk of losing their cultural identity. Younger generations didn't want to be Maori for fear of punishment, but in the 20th century, a movement started for the revitalization of Maori culture.
My name is Jason King, and I teach Maori development, I teach Maori leadership, I teach Maori language. Being Maori means that we can say where we come from, who we are, why we are, and how we got to be here.
And simply the word just means to be normal. Kia ora, ko Anahira tōku ingoa. My name's Anahira, and I teach Te Reo Māori, so I'm helping the revitalisation of the language. A marae is like a huge complex. It includes the wharenui, what you see behind me. For me, the marae is a place for the community. I really enjoy bringing people into the Māori world and breaking their preconceived conceptions on what Māori are and who they claim to be.
We're not just people who are savages, who are natives and who would eat people and all these stories that would come out. We're actually kind people who are hospitable and who actually are quite clever with the way we do things. Who are inspiring, who encourage others to learn their own culture. And it's no surprise that most of our classes are filled with non-Māori people wanting to learn Māori language and Māori culture. Protocols, customs, you name it. People have started to strip away their goggles of colonization to really look deeper into what the Māori culture is all about.
I just hope that they feel a sense of belonging to the space, that they're always accepted and welcome. That's all I want anybody to feel when they come, when they're officially welcomed onto our marae. My grandparents lived in an age where they were abused for practicing their culture, for using their language every day. The concept of genealogy, your family lineage, and that is the most treasured possession that you could possibly have, and pass that knowledge on, hold those memories of those ancestors fond.
My dad never spoke to us in the Māori language, so he went to a native school. He was beaten at school by the teachers for not knowing any English, so he hated education, he hated schooling. Hence the reason why he didn't want us to learn the language, because he didn't want us to go through that same beating. It was a real despondent time when our parents were going through their development. There was the stigma that being Māori was not cool, and infiltrated the majority of Māori families to the point where they felt that if they put their Māoriness to the side, things would be better, because being Māori is being poor and being underrepresented in politics and having the lowest paid jobs is because you are Māori. I felt something missing in me that I longed for. So when I heard people speak, I said, hey, that's me, but I can't do that. Why can't I do that? 100 years ago, you would never see this place here in a mainstream university. Now, many universities have a marae as a space for people to come and celebrate the Māori culture, not just for Māori, but for everyone. So these sorts of things are also indicators that we're in good stead, heading in the right path. We should be sharing our knowledge to make the world a better place, to make the world global citizens, to make the world change agents of the future. There's no difference between the Māori people, Indigenous Māori people of New Zealand, to the First Nations people in North America. If we look at places like Vermont, we have the Abenaki people right there at your doorstep.
This bond between the Māori and other Indigenous cultures is something Jason works hard to maintain, and is part of what brought him and others halfway around the world to Vermont. The connection came about because one of the deans at Champlain wanted to bring some of the Māori culture in New Zealand to America and share that with our community in Vermont.
My role really was from the trip that I took to New Zealand, went to visit Auckland University of Technology. We felt that it was important to bring a Māori artist to Vermont to do a carving using native wood and to connect with the Abenaki community.
That idea came about, then we picked the carver, and the carver who's Pahi and his work is immaculate.
So what's 1 meter?
Kia ora, my name's Pahi. I'm from a small town in Aotearoa called Hawera, and I teach Māori wool carving, Indigenous art.
And then a piece of...
The search for the wood was a long search. It took about a year, and eventually I was led to the wood shop at Shelburne Farms. The artist, Pahi, had never seen the wood, so there was this implicit trust that it was going to be the right piece of wood, and it turned out to be. And we were able to proceed with the blessing that needed to happen prior to the first cut.
It's important for me as an artist to share the art of whakairo, or the art of Māori wood carving, with anyone who wants to know about it.
To acknowledge the Abenaki people is imperative for us as Indigenous peoples coming into other people's lands, but those lines of communications are now starting to open where they never were before.
During Pahi and Jason's visit to the U.S., they met with the Abenaki tribe of Vermont for a weekend of celebration and discussion. This bond influenced Pahi's carving, and after weeks of work, it was time for the unveiling ceremony.
The pari whakairo symbolises the close connection and foundations that have been fashioned through AUT and Champlain's relationship over the many years. It also recognises and acknowledges the Indigenous people, the Abenaki, and how our values, beliefs and traditions are very much interconnected. We are here, we are this little people in the South Pacific, but we hold on to our values, strong within our teachings, our protocols and our language.
That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I'm going global. Because the more people I can teach, the higher the survival rate. These people who I am teaching are going to be educators, they're going to be leaders, they're going to be CEOs, they're going to be managers, they're going to be influential people in the world. And so if I can get in front of them and talk to them about what we do as Māori, as Indigenous peoples, then maybe there's hope for them to pass on that same gift to others within their own communities, to other Indigenous peoples.
For the Maori, it's a remarkable turnaround. They've gone from being known as victims of discrimination to people who are unafraid to speak up and share who they are. But despite the progress they've made creating these connections with unfamiliar people, their struggle's not over. Even today, Indigenous cultures like the Maori and the Abenaki deal with issues of discrimination and must cope with a system built to keep them out of power.
We are continuing that fight. A lot of Māori are still continuing to be recognised. I think the survival with our culture and of our language will be in our grandchildren's grandchildren. So I look to the future with not a heavy heart, but a very with good and lovely anticipation of what's to come.
And we're back with Julia and Kevin. A couple questions for you guys. Why did you want to make this documentary? Julia, can you start us off?
Sure. Kevin and I took a class in New Zealand with Jason, and we heard that he was going to be traveling to Burlington during our fall semester with Pahi to make this carving. So it sparked our interest and we wanted to share that story.
Awesome. And Kevin, why did you want to make this documentary?
Well, after traveling to New Zealand, we kind of looked around a bit and saw just how prevalent the Maori culture was there, especially when you compare it to the US and the native cultures here. They've really been able to kind of keep their culture alive and maintain that identity. So we were really interested in just exploring that.
Cool. And Julia, what would you say the biggest production challenge you faced was?
The biggest production challenge for us was just working in two completely separate places halfway across the world from each other, because we had to have everything done in New Zealand before our visas were up and we had to leave the country. And then we had to have everything done in Vermont by the time the carving was unveiled and Jason and Pahi returned home. So it was definitely like a timing thing.
Oh, cool. And then Kevin, what do you hope this documentary will achieve going forward?
Well, we wanted to give viewers kind of just a look at this culture that they probably have never heard of. And then beyond that, maybe also make them more interested in exploring their own cultural history and kind of learning more about their ancestors, and also be into maybe learning more about other people's cultures as well.
Awesome. Really nice job, guys. Thank you so much.
That's our show. Thanks so much for watching Champlain Presents.
And special thanks to Jess Wilson, Executive Director at RETN, and the Media Factory staff for all of their help, especially for helping us do this show virtually. We want to give a shout out from the whole class. I'm Olivia Cephalou.
I'm Annabelle Pike. So long.
Well done, everyone. Some wonderful, wonderful stories, and I am just blown away and still just thinking about everything. It was just awesome. Keith, amazing work, amazing work.
Well, thank you very much, Vandora, and to you too, Jess. I want to give a shout out to a couple of people and mention a few things before we say goodnight. First of all, this program, without our introductions, is going to air on RETN, part of the Media Factory, throughout the summer. And that leads to the couple of thank yous I want to give. First is to Jeff Lloyd. Jeff Lloyd is a graduate of the broadcast program from 2018. He made a doc back then called Voices of Tibet about the local Tibetan community, and he won an award. And now, happy to say, Jess, that he is employed by the Media Factory, and he was our technical director as well as the editor for this program, and with your good guidance, he put it all together. And a big thank you to you, Jess. You and I have worked in this class for 6 years now, and it's just always great to see it all come together. I've been really privileged to have someone from industry like you, who has a full-time job, by the way, lending her wisdom and really meaningful advice to our students.
It's a lot of fun for me, and especially just to see the work develop throughout the semester. It's really some fantastic work, and it's really my pleasure to help then share this with the whole community via, our television channels and our website. And I'm looking forward to seeing this out there and sharing it with more people.
And that will happen. So I guess that's the end for us tonight. From all of us, we're going to give you a group wave. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Students, families, friends, and people within the Champlain community, we really appreciate your support.
Yes, and congratulations, class of 2020.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, very well done.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Good
Thank
night,
you for joining
everyone.
us.